If there's something you desire or want to do that does not bring harm to others, do it. Whether that's finding a different job, starting an organization, creating art, anything. We've interviewed people on our own podcast and we've seen people in our programming, and that is the number one thing that people who have had any sort of degree of success in the world say is just start, begin, move, act. And people who feel stuck often are saying, well, I don't know. And there's nobody who's moving and in action in a meaningful way that would say that they feel that notion of being stuck.
Welcome to The Climb, where I help Christian men live fully, lead boldly, and leave a legacy that matters. I'm your host, Teko Bailey, husband, father, life coach, and your guide in the climb. Whether you're navigating fatherhood, building a business, or simply longing to live more purpose, this is a space to rise. Greg, it's a pleasure having you on The Climb. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Teko. It's a pleasure to be here. And as we were talking about before, a really cool way we got connected. And so
Yes.
I'd like to chase that connection for sure.
Awesome. Would you mind introducing yourself to our listeners?
Sure. My name is, of course, Greg. I'm a Canadian, as we have established. So live in beautiful Ontario, Canada. My journey has been 15 years of one career path, putting sort of one step in front of another professionally in the tech sector. So high growth and becoming part of executive teams and leading teams and growing teams, but finding myself at an inflection point in my life back in 2020, which I'm sure we'll talk about, and the recovery from that experience forcing me to confront the fact that maybe this career that I had built and the life that I had built wasn't really aligned to who I truly was and what life was meant to be for me. So recently my wife and I started a business. It's called Vienna Waits. And our whole objective and intention, I guess the mission we're on, is to help 1 million people be more intentional about how they live their lives. And that means work more intentionally, be more present and intentional in their daily lives. And a number of ways we do that, but that's the overarching mission. We've got lots we can talk about there.
Absolutely love the goal, and I love the vision. I love the mission. Take me back to, I know you've been through some major transitions. Take me back to a little bit of what was going on in that time. Maybe what triggered the transition, what some of the challenges that was going on there for you.
So I think in these conversations, find it so important to acknowledge the privilege that I've had in my life. As I said, growing up in Ontario in Canada, being a white male and having been born into a middle-class family with hardworking parents who are educated, had a lot of privilege in my upbringing that is so easy to lose sight of and important to remain mindful of and grateful of, especially when you start talking about challenges and things that you faced. The journey that I had was years of, as I mentioned before, one foot in front of another. Went to post-secondary, a great school, and had a great career that was growing. And by the time I was 30, I'd been kind of called into the executive circle at one of Canada's fastest growing tech companies. And in 2020, all of us faced different challenges in orders of magnitude. At that point in my life, I would have been sort of early 30s. My wife at the time, her name is Allison. She and I had 3 young kids under the age of 5, and coming into 2020, we had been through those years. Who, if you've had young parents on this podcast, or if you know any young parents, you certainly know that
being one.
Yeah, those early years are hard for couples.
Yes.
And so I think we came into 2020 saying, let's have this be a year that we reset and try to refocus and recalibrate. And what what happened next before we got into COVID is she was diagnosed in the beginning of February with glioblastoma. So it's brain cancer.
Mm.
And it was a high grade brain tumor. And she had started to get concerned that there was something wrong because her vision was blurring. She had these terrible headaches and was unable to sleep and really just engage in day to day life. And that diagnosis, and then the news that it'll never get better, uh,
Mm.
this is the best it'll ever be, was a completely life changing moment that is
Whoa.
impossible to forget. But it still wasn't clear what the outcome would be, and it was about a week later that she had a biopsy just to determine, is this a fast growth, high grade tumor, or is it just a situation that we know this will be terminal, we know this will end her life, but will it be 5 years, 20 years, or less? And they determined it was a high grade glioblastoma, which meant that life beyond 18 months was not even in the realm of possibility. And
Wow.
so we had to get prepared for treatment and what that might mean. And she had a very, very fast degradation in her health, and she passed away in June of 2020. Um, so all of the things that I had been handed in life, and the work that I'd done to build the career and I think establish a life, just got thrown into a state of chaos and a bit of disarray. But also, I think it gave me the opportunity to reflect on, what is this really about?
Yeah.
What is life for? What were some choices that I had been making in my life that were aligned to values? What were my values? These are all, I think, questions that I intentionally or unintentionally got confronted with, while
Yeah.
also needing to parent these three young kids and navigate COVID, which
Man.
was well underway
Oh
by the
my
time
gosh.
she passed away. So um, that was really the inflection point for me that changed the entire course of my life. If I could riff on that for one moment, though, Deko,
Go. Absolutely.
prior to that, I think that life had been kind to me in so many ways that I had a lot of great opportunities and worked hard, and I had my intelligence um, and again good mentors and people surrounding me growing up. But in my 20s, I remember feeling a very deep sense of anxiety for whatever reason. I just felt like something was going to go wrong. It's impossible to describe at the time, but looking back, I can maybe remember the circumstances in a bit of a different way. But
Yeah.
it was this real deep anxiety, and I had some success in a job, but I was just sure at any moment the other shoe was going to drop and I'd start failing, and it was very strange. And in order to navigate that anxiety and the challenges that I had, I started getting some help and I started a therapy practice. I started a diary or journaling practice, and I got a toolkit, so to speak, of
Yeah.
how do you navigate challenging self-talk when the problem's really between your two ears? How do you navigate that without having been through those challenges in my 20s? When then facing this
Hmm.
crisis, there
Yeah.
would have been I wouldn't have had the tools to manage through that time, because it really was the meditation practice, the mindfulness practice, the exercise, the journaling that went into hyperdrive through that period that allowed me to figure out how to put one foot in front of the other for sure.
That's a lot for one man to go through. It is. And the fact that you're still alive is a testament to your ability to persevere, or, you know, of course, none of that sounds easy in any way. What was a turning point for you? What kept you going? What I know you talk about the you mentioned psychology, or just different practices that you did.
you've hit rock bottom in many ways. A father, a husband, losing your wife, having young kids. Who doesn't run away from that? What kept you?
There's I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about this, but there's a concept that I became obsessed or recently have become obsessed with, which is the concept of post-traumatic growth, which is a relatively new concept in psychology. But there's post-traumatic stress disorder, which kind of gets thrown around all the time. I have
Yeah,
PTSD about this or that. Really well documented and researched that people navigate terrible and challenging circumstances and can get stuck, and you can't question it. I mean, that is, you have to honor what got anybody into a place
yeah,
of stress, because for those people who are enduring true post-traumatic stress disorder, there's trauma there
yeah,
that that got them stuck. But this study of post-traumatic growth looked at periods of time in history where people went through these terrible circumstances where many had gotten stuck in the past, but they experienced some form of growth. They all of a sudden had a different view of life. They were able to achieve more. Their fears went away, and they've in the research documented these different dimensions or domains of post-traumatic growth. And I remember when I found this theory, I went, oh my gosh, I had that exact
yeah,
experience. That I think in all those ways, my sense of connection to others, my sense of uh, belief in what I'm capable of, that
yeah,
grew. Like all these domains grew for me. And the research pointed to two things essentially that are going to determine if your path will take you down being stuck or down the growth path. And
hmm,
the two things typically are, first, it's engaging with the trauma and the
yeah,
experience. Tucking it away and burying it or running away from it, as you alluded to, is a recipe for getting stuck because you've got to address it. And in
hmm,
my case, having three young kids, there's no avoiding it.
yeah,
Now, every Disney movie you've ever seen has a parent who, after this conversation, go through your list of Disney movies
yeah,
where you don't have a parent, and there's none. They all die. There's always a parent who is lost, and that's the crux of the drama in every one of these films. And what's often portrayed is a grieving, widow or widower who's just stricken with that loss through their narrative. That gets glamorized in in media and in our culture. But this idea that you can face the challenge, and with your children, for me, having the kids, I knew that I would have to
yeah,
face it every day and have a productive relationship with that grief and that loss in order to myself lead them through that experience. And so therapy 101, that
hmm,
was, so I had a friend and colleague who referred me to an incredible therapist who just helped me sit with the grief and the loss and gave me the tools to prepare for the conversations that my 4 and 5-year-old would ask,
yeah,
and just prepare me for what Allison's parents might do and say, as they were going through their grief journey and as I was navigating my own. So I think that's one, and it aligns to the post-traumatic growth, is engaging with the grief. The other is doing it with others.
yeah,
So being in that process or going through it with others. And the therapist, as a professional guide, served that purpose. But I also had, first, a really close network of friends that are now my truest and best friends in my life who leaned in. I had many friends who didn't know how to engage with me,
yeah,
and they had their own issues of COVID going on, so they went off, and I stopped hearing from a lot of them, and that was really hard. But I had some people that dialed in and showed up and became really present as true friends. So I had some friends of ours who they were navigating their own experiences of grief and loss for Allison, but also with COVID, there was so much chaos in their own lives that they
yeah,
didn't really know how to engage with me through that time. And so, as hard as that was, they went and disappeared. But a very small number came into my life and showed up in a really meaningful way. And we planned Allison's funeral and celebration of life, and we did that together as a small community, and that really helped.
Yes.
But then, really centrally, I mentioned being remarried, so I've remarried now, and I had a partner, somebody who I'd known for years and years. Her name's Whitney, who Allison knew, and she knew Allison. I was so respectful of the loss and just heartbroken by what we were going through.
Yeah.
But she's leaned into my life in a beautiful way,
Come
and
on.
it also said, "Look, like I was not a catch. A grieving widower with 3 young kids under the age of 5. It's not like this is
Yeah.
the dream guy, right?"
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, she's always somebody who I admired and respected, and then we took that friendship and that professional relationship and turned it into a romantic one. And I mean, that was, I don't know how our family and me gets through 2020 without that combination of the therapist, those small number of friends, and
Yeah.
without Whitney. Yeah.
Wow. COVID,
COVID. I mean, we
losing
all have, yeah.
family, kids, that's the layers are just so tight and so stacked against you. But I think I would agree with you if you have a small community around you who really believe in you and who really um, is there to support you. It can be very life-giving. What was the hardest part, if you can remember, of working through yourself being a dad and what that would look like without their mom?
I think there's a couple of things that come to mind, and that's such a great question to think back and really reflect on that. In my prior answer, I didn't mention my family, but I think they that should go without saying, but it doesn't, because my family came into my life in a really meaningful way through that time and supported me unconditionally, which is a beautiful thing through that time.
Yeah,
And when I think about redefining, I think the hardest thing had something to do with knowing that these kids would always have coming to terms with the fact that these kids would never have their mom,
yeah,
and knowing that I would never be enough to fill that gap for them.
hmm,
And whether it was Whitney or anybody who was in my life would never fill that gap for them, but not trying to fix the hurt or fill the gap, but just let them sit in it the way I had to. I think that was a hard
yeah,
thing, figuring out how to do that as their dad. It went from being their dad to being like their boss at a company where you're going through a cash flow crisis, and the investors are going crazy, and it becomes a lot more about survival. It's warm and it's loving, but it was much more
yeah,
like, hey, and you just told me that you hate me, and like, where's mom, and I don't want to talk to you, and I'm just gonna say, hey man, or I have a daughter as well.
yeah,
Uh, hey, kids, I love you. There is no way for your mom to come and speak to you in the way that you want her to,
hmm,
but we developed systems and ways to remember her that I think gave the kids a connection. But even with that, it'll never be enough. So I think coming
yeah.
to terms with that has been really hard.
Nice. I like that how you put it. Greg, this is a powerful and a very delicate story in many ways. When I think of what you've been through, stamina is the word that comes to mind. Because again, I don't think everybody going through what you've gone through could quite make it through. I know some people wouldn't. What was it about the therapy or some of the processes that you went through to go through healing and just kind of explore what was happening in your life that was most helpful? And I ask you this specifically so that those who are listening can get while their situations might not be exactly the same, at least some key nuggets, like, when you're going through a very hard season, oftentimes you're either in isolation,
Mm.
it's hard to talk about it, you don't have the language to talk about it, or you can't see beyond the situation, so it's hard to think ahead of it. Um, what were some of the things that helped you in therapy that was most helpful, I guess? Yeah.
On that, I think one of the things that I've struggled with in conversations with people, whenever I have the opportunity or privilege of sharing some of my story, sometimes people will respond with, what I'm going through isn't nearly as hard as that is. And they'll diminish their own
Mm-hmm.
experience because it's relative. And I think if anyone is listening and has that in inclination, then I would
Yes.
immediately want to talk you out of that, because everyone's experience is theirs. What's hard for one person is different than what's hard for another person. And if it seems smaller, it isn't. Now
Yeah.
that I've endured this hard thing, things that are hard to others don't seem so hard to me. And people who've gone through harder things than I've been through, would look at that and go, oh yeah, well, I've lost both my parents, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
There's not a, it's not a vulnerability competition, as we like to say in our programming, or anything like that.
Exactly.
So just, I think honoring on the one hand, like honoring whatever the challenge is that you're facing, and the reality that whatever you're facing is hard, and giving yourself that grace is a really important piece of the puzzle, just to begin with.
Yeah.
So I would just start there. But from a tactically and from a therapy perspective, I think that something that I had to be very mindful of in coming to that conclusion that I will never be enough, so to speak, to fill this gap in their lives.
Yeah.
I think there's an ego side of you that doesn't want that to be true, because there's a part of you that wants to show up and solve the problem and be the hero and put them on your back and tell them that it'll be fine. And interestingly, the first thing that my therapist said to me that I needed to reassure to the kids, because then one of the first questions they would ask me, they're like, she told me, they're gonna ask you, Dad, are you gonna die?
Wow.
She's like, they're gonna ask you that, and you need to tell them. Every part of you is gonna want to say, no, I'm not gonna die. I'm gonna be fine. Daddy loves you. I'll be here forever, and blah 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 blah. She said, don't do that. That your number one inclination is gonna be to protect them, but you need to. They've been exposed to the harsh realities of life, and you need to now be there with them. And you
Wow.
tell them, yeah, I am gonna die. I hope not for a long time, but I don't know when. And you have to let them feel and embrace that there is uncertainty. And I think being able to let go of the idea that I needed to fix all the problems or solve all of them gave me, or allowed me to give myself permission to do whatever work I had to do on me. Because if I
Yes.
wasn't okay, they wouldn't be okay. That meant that if I needed an extra hour to exercise, or to journal, or just to be alone, that I should be finding resources. When somebody says, can I help? I should say yes, so that I can take that time for whatever I might need. And I think that the inclination is, no. They need me. I need to help them. I need to,
Yes.
and in the pursuit of that, you'll just burn yourself out, and then you won't be any good for anyone.
Well, it's
And
like putting on your oxygen mask first.
yes, that's a great way to put it. Absolutely.
1 second, I have a nosy child who
I
is.
saw a visitor coming your way.
Oh my gosh. Sorry about that. I'm writing a book, Awakening the Hero Within, and I love how you talk about, it's easy to play. I think if I remember, you said it's easy to play the hero. You just jump with them on your back and, you can solve the problem. And, as men, we can be very good at jumping into that mode versus sitting with the challenge, sitting with the problem, processing it, and really understand how is it impacting us? How is it impacting our families? What would you say to guys where it's easy for us to jump into this I guess you could say, hero mode or savior mode and just fix the problem so we can get on with it versus sitting into it and really understand what's happening to us. Because I think a lot of times we have broken places that we don't get to deal with. And because it hasn't been dealt with, it's spewing out in different ways in our relationships, in our parenting. Um, as fathers, what advice or suggestions do you have, especially in situations like these?
There's another friend who came into my life when I was given the news of Allison's diagnosis, and her name's Heather, and she had lost her stepfather and her father in a really short period of time in close succession. And she was very generous in connecting with me when she heard the news and sharing a bit of her experience. And one of the ways she characterized the experience of grief, having just recently been through that, was this idea of waves. Things will just
Yeah.
come in these waves over time, and it's uncontrollable in terms of when it'll show up or how, but it'll just hit. I had another friend who later that year would go on to lose. He was friends with Allison, but then he was also very close with his father, and his dad very suddenly passed away later in 2020. And he reflected back to me this narrative he had been given of this idea that you go through life and you got this backpack that you carry, and these hard things you face in the course of your life are like weights that go into the backpack, that
Mm,
you at some point could get weighed down by. So if I could blend those two narratives, if I were to kind of put it together as some sort of a blended metaphor, rather than waves, I'll think of it as storms, perhaps. But
yeah.
I think that the visual for men of going through life, having a backpack that you carry, and there's things that are just going to get loaded in and added onto that backpack over time. If you think about the natural course of our lives, we grow stronger for so much of it, and at some point, our bodies do break down and start to get weaker. But
Yes.
we only really think of being strong, and I think that you don't get strong just by adding more weight to the backpack and continuing to carry on. You get strong by taking the backpack off from time to time, organizing the things that are inside of it so that things aren't moving around properly, maybe doing some stretching, some squats,
Yeah.
maybe doing some leg presses, some push-ups, then putting the backpack back on and carrying on. Because I think what can blow us off our path is just adding more in and then continuing to just trek onward without making those adjustments, and then getting hit by a storm somewhere along that journey. And not only
Yeah.
are you is the weight all mixed in the back, but now your footing's unsure because you can't really see in front of you, and it's going to be a complete mess. I think the duty we owe to anyone that's coming on that journey with us is, and those are the teams we lead, the families that we have. Like, we're all on these journeys with other people. Uh, you're going to do better to take that backpack off from time to time, reflect on it, get it organized, and do some of that exercise, whether that's therapy or joining a group of some sort, being a part of
Yeah.
a faith community, whatever it might be. That's the work that's going to allow you to have a clear view and to carry that weight that you're going to have through your life into your old age, because otherwise it'll just break you down.
I love the analogy. I would segue a little bit into purpose because I feel like sometimes as we go through hardships, it kind of opens up this new world of maybe there's more or leading you into something that feels more purposeful. And I think you hinted a little bit of that in the earlier part of our conversation. Um, what doors or what pathways has this experience opened up for you? Because I know your wife, your new wife, and
Whitney, yeah.
yourself, Whitney, is now doing Vienna Waits. How did that come into being, and It seems very purpose driven because you have a vision to help transform a million lives. I think that's powerful. And tell me a little bit about that and how you guys moved into that.
I would love to. So both of us, Whitney and I, were hardworking and had built these careers in the tech industry that's fast paced and exciting and pays well and has lots of benefits to it. One thing that's notoriously true about the technology sector, though, is it's fairly ruthless and soulless.
Yeah.
There's great people in the sector, but that's really all the goodness there is to it. When you're selling software, margins are high, clients come and go, and they're fickle. And so it really ultimately comes down to good business cases, ROI, and how much investors will fund before you run out of cash. There's very few software companies that say we want to achieve some higher purpose with this technology we've built.
Yeah.
And I think that we built our relationship through this period of crisis, not just in my life, but Whitney was also navigating a lot in her life of COVID's hitting, and she has a young son who I've now taken on the responsibility of being a stepfather, and she's got an incredible co-parenting relationship with her ex-husband and his partner, and a lot of complexity in her life growing up, and now we created a life together that was very thoughtful and intentional. We had to put all these pieces together very meticulously. And then we just got a house, got a mortgage, went back to work, found jobs once again in the tech sector, and continued to make great money in the technology sector, living our lives. And we stepped back from that and went, did we go through all of that just to save money and retire and travel when we're in our 60s? It just seemed crazy that we
Yeah.
would navigate a whole life-changing experience and then go back to what life had been before, or what it had looked like before. I don't recall who said it first, and it may be a bad person to reference, so apologies if it is, but this notion of, don't waste a good crisis. Like, a crisis presents an opportunity.
Yeah.
And we grew so much through that time together. And the big learning we had was how intentional we were in those years when we were putting our family together and building what would be this new life. And so that's where the origins of it came from. Is it possible for us to step off of the fast pace of our lives and actually build something that's meaningful and impactful? And we landed on this idea of helping people to be more intentional about how they live. And what that has translated to is people like you, Teko, and people like us who, deep down, I always just wanted to teach, and I wanted to lead, and I wanted to be helpful.
Come on.
And I wanted to do something that was unlocking the potential of other people. So we looked at what our skills were, and we said, well, we could build a program that would help people to take an idea and bring it to life and launch it into the world. And we put some structure in place, which I'm really good at, and we'll facilitate this online learning, which I've done 15 years of online learning in the industry. So these are the skills I have. Let's create it, and let's create this as a way to help other people do the same thing. And that's what it translated itself to. And living intentionally started as a very broad concept, but it's gotten very focused on, you've got an idea or something inside you that you've thought of doing or dreamed about doing, but you just haven't because life's too busy.
Yeah.
When is that diagnosis going to come and hit you? When is that terrible thing going to happen to someone you love? Are you going to wait for that to be what puts you into action? Because that's what it took for me. But if we can help people to say, no, I can do that. I can create change in my own life. I can be more present and active in bringing my dreams to life without a crisis. That feels like a worthy mission. And that's the work that we're trying to do through, we've got a podcast of our own, and we've got, which is how you found us, which is pretty cool. And we've got a program that we run called Unblock Yourself. And then we just ran our first retreat last week called Waypoint, which was all oriented around this purpose of impacting 1 million people and helping them to be more intentional with how they live.
So good. I love it. I love it. I love the ecosystem, and I love how holistic in your approach you guys are looking at it, because I think so many families are uh in a disarray and falling apart, and trying to be successful in one area but not really successful in the other. And they know something is missing, but to stop and take the time to actually be like, let me figure out what this really is. Who has time for that? But if you do step back and make the time for it, you would be so much more fulfilled in what you're doing and more purposeful in your existence. And I think it's amazing what you guys are doing. And just again, you guys coming from a fast-paced technology world to be like, no, we can pause, we can make the changes, it is possible. I think people hearing your story, it gives them hope that you can step back, take a break, and then see what happens. And it's okay if everything doesn't go perfect at the first attempt, but you can make changes accordingly. And I think that's both my wife and I approach life in a similar way, because there is more to life than just you know going on the hamster wheel and just never coming off of it.
Right.
In your experience, what qualities or values would you say defines a man who is stepping into his true purpose? And how does that translate into the role of him being a father or a husband or a leader? I know that's a bit of a mouthful,
That's a big
but
question.
in your own
In my
words, how would you, I guess, as you've worked with people and had different experiences, and we're not putting anybody in a box, but I guess speaking to men and fathers, what are some of those values that you think sometimes we're searching and we're like, if we hear other people sharing thoughts and ideas, it maybe helps us to identify or be like, yeah, I think maybe I need a little of that or a little less of this or
Yeah, that is a huge question, and what a privilege to be asked a question like that. Um, it's just nice being in your company, and somebody who'd even ask a question like that is so deeply thoughtful and thought provoking. So I'm looking forward to more conversations like this with you.
absolutely.
This is just top of mind for me, so there's a bit of a recency bias, but I actually think it's true and maybe a good way to answer the question. I think that what's lacking, what's so important, and I think it is one of our core values, is gratitude. And so I'd start
Mm,
with gratitude. I have one other, but I think gratitude would be the first. I think when you look at anything in your life through the lens of gratitude and you see abundance instead of lack, I think it gives you an opportunity to be so much more present instead of striving for whatever else you might be looking for.
yeah.
I think that men and women, but speaking as a as the person who I am as a man, I've always felt this need to provide in our culture, and even more so when I became a single father, had to find a way to provide. But what does that mean in our context? I mean, is that a bigger house or a nicer car or
Hmm.
more vacations? Is it just being present and giving my children the tools so that they can navigate and find their way to live a life that is full of values and richness and goodness? Or because I think we get stuck as I, I don't want to say this is only men, but I think what I have shared the experience with is getting stuck thinking that providing means the things and the nice cars. But I think what we want for our kids is to be happy and to be
Yeah.
good human beings. And what that really means is being present, being grateful for what you have, and being true to yourself. And so I think what's missing is gratitude. It's been true for my life for a lot of it. And I think I'm really dialing into that mode now of feeling so grateful for the health that I have, for the health of the kids, for my friends, for things that are a lot simpler than the things that I spent so much of my life striving for. And I see abundance where maybe there wasn't abundance in the
Yeah.
past. So I think gratitude is the first. And then the second would be to this question of being a father or being a friend and a man is just action. Take, like, boldly act. If you
Come
have
on.
something that is, let's just make this as broad as possible. If there's something you desire or want to do that does not bring harm to others, do it. Whether that's finding a different job, starting an organization, creating art, anything.
Yeah.
We've interviewed people on our own podcast and we've seen people in our programming, and that is the number one thing that people who have had any sort of degree of success in the world say is just start, begin, move, act. And people who feel stuck often are saying, well, I don't know. And there's nobody who's moving and in action
Yeah.
in a meaningful way that would say that they feel that notion of being stuck. So I think it's combining, because the work that we do now and the action that we're in isn't about getting more. It's
Yeah.
just about doing more and helping more. And just, I think the whole orientation of our values has changed, I think, around this idea of first gratitude, just being so grateful for everything that we have, and then just putting things into action and moving. And that's been transformational for us.
I love that. As Brené Brown would say, do it afraid.
Yeah, do it afraid. I think that's a great quote.
Yeah.
There's a friend of mine who's an author. His name is David Primer.
Yeah.
And he and I went for a walk together recently, and he said something that was so profound to me, and for you as a parent as well. This would resonate, I'm sure, and you're doing this work now. But he said the greatest benefit that I would have never expected from writing a book was that my kids believe they can do anything.
So good.
It was so good. It
So
wasn't like
good.
it wasn't like I get better prospects for my speaking career, or
Yeah.
I've made $1 million. It was, for kids to look at of their idiot of a dad, because all their kids think we're idiots to some
Yeah.
degree. Let's be real. Oh, my dad, but
Yeah.
you wrote a book. You
Yeah.
you put ideas into the world that really are about trying to be helpful. And if
I
you can do that, I can do that.
I find it quite interesting that you actually said that, because I'm doing some pre selling of the book, and just some semi gatherings, and one of the guys asked me why I wrote the book, and I said, first and foremost, I want my boys to see some of the experiences I've been through. The book is called Awakening the Hero Within, a man's uh, journey, and, in a sense, a pathway to help men find purpose, resilience, and faith. And I want them to be able to see a bit of my journey, some of the challenges I experience, and how they can use nuggets from that in their own lives when they go through those seasons, and, in a sense, have a compass or a roadmap that they can follow and use some of those guidances, because I won't always be around and I won't always be there in every situation that they are. And I think, again, the same thing, if I can write one, so can they.
Yeah.
So I find it quite interesting that you said that, because I've been thinking the same way. Like, first and foremost, it's dedicated to them, and I want them to know that whatever challenges come their way in life, there's a way to overcome it, and there are certain principles that they can apply to get to the next level or the next step. So absolutely agree on that.
Awesome. I love I love that you're doing that work and that you're translating it, or even perceiving it in that kind of way. I think it's a worthy cause, right? And we just need uh, an unforgettable moment for me as Whitney and I were putting our families together was Her ex-husband, again, they maintain such a good and healthy relationship just to
Yeah.
raise this young man, and who I now get to step parent and be a part of his life. And early on, I came to him and I said, look, I want to really be respectful of you and your role. Like, you're his
Yeah.
dad. I'm here and I want to be helpful, but I never want to get in the way of, of your relationship with him as a father. And he really shrugged it off in a genuine and humble way. And he told me that more good people raising a young man, a young person, is only going to be good. So in his view, there's nothing I could do that would get in the way.
Come on.
Which is a unique and pretty incredible sentiment, and something that I would hope anyone who ever blends a family or has that scenario, I would hope that they have that kind of collaboration and partnership, because what we do for the kids in our lives is so impactful, or has the potential to be so impactful. But we tend to get in our own way, don't we?
So true. How do you see yourself, Greg, having been through all of that and where you are today? In what ways do you see yourself differently compared to who you were before all of this happened?
Hmm. That's another great question. I think that I was afraid for so much of my life. Like, that anxiety I had in my 20s, it was always there. I think I always just carried this fear. And then it all went away through that time of the diagnosis, and then just finding my footing in my own family. The fear went away and I felt there's a lot of clarity about what was important in my life. And then the fear came back, and now I don't feel afraid again. And so
Wow.
I think I've found that place where I'm sure the fear will come back, of some expectations, some sense of what if I fail, some sense of disconnect. I'm sure there's going to be challenges and roadblocks, but right now, genuinely, I don't feel afraid. And I feel like I now know that it's because I'm just living in alignment with whatever that purpose is for me. I've
Nice.
found that. And
Nice.
it's just like, take it. Like, you can't take that away from me. Like, I'm just making it for myself.
Come on.
Nobody can take that away from me. This
Come
is
on.
my thing. Like,
And
nothing, you can't take anything away from me now. I'm in control. And not in control in a bad way. I mean, I'm in control of my destiny, and I'm also totally open to whatever comes next.
I love that. I love that. It sounds like tools are in your tool belt that you can pull from as situations changes, and you actually have a little bit more insight and wisdom how to use them.
Yeah. Well, we have this shared love for Bobby Alou, it sounds like, the amazing, incredible, and talented Bobby
Come
Alou.
on. Come
And
on.
he there's a person, we talked about imposter syndrome on our podcast episode, where he was very generous to come on and chat, and he's sure, I feel that, but you kind of like learn to feel the discomfort, and then you just always know, once you've done it a couple times, that on the other side is something great.
That's right.
And once you are comfortable with that, like, what is there to be afraid of? All kinds of things you could be afraid of, but I was always so envious of musicians, because you'd see them making their art and you'd always go, gosh, I never wanted to be a musician myself, but I'd be like, what is it that they have?
Yeah.
Because I want that. I want that carelessness, like, to sing and to just create something and be on stage. How cool is that? And I think that Bobby Alou is fearless. And I think that I'm going to strive to stay fearless in the same sort of way.
Love it. Love it. What do people need to know about Vienna Waits? Tell us about your programs and how they can get in touch with you guys.
Yeah, please. Very generous of you to ask once again. Thank you for having me here as part of this conversation, Teko. I've been a big fan of this, and I hope that we can stay connected through lots more. Vienna
Absolutely.
Waits, as I said, we're on this mission to help 1 million people live intentionally. I'd say, if you're listening to this and you say, hey, I've got an idea, something that I'd love to create, it might be a side hustle, It might be a business that you're starting or that you've started, but it's just not doing what you want. It's not achieving the vision that you had for it. The best thing to do is reach out to us. We have a program called Unblock Yourself, and just reach out to me personally, greg@vienna-waits.com, or you can follow us on LinkedIn or on Instagram, which is at Vienna Waits Studio, and learn more about the Unblock Yourself program. And if it looks like it could be a fit for you, I'd love to chat and get you involved with that. Our next one starts in January, and that program is all about getting a group of people together, giving them a framework for how to get some clarity around what it is you want to achieve, put that goal in place, and then work with others over the course of 3 months to get after it. And you've got the people around you cheering you on, supporting you, just helping you bring that whole idea to life.
Absolutely love it, Greg. Love what you guys are doing. Love what you and Whitney are doing. It's really good stuff. We need more of that in the world. And whatever I can do to help you hit that 1 million goal, I'm not even kidding. I
Yeah.
will definitely do what I can to help push that and support you guys.
Thank you. This just even having a conversation. This is another one of those conversations where it just feels like if somebody hears this and is in any way helped by it, it's just totally in line with what we're all about. So we'd love to hear from anybody that is impacted in any way by this, and we're going to share it as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us on The Climb, Greg. It was a pleasure having you.
Thanks, Teko. I look forward to listening to this and many more.